Hello everyone, how is it going? Today we're going to be taking a look at Hitman Absolution by Feral Interactive across iPhone and iPad. I've got a few devices behind me and we're going to have a look at how the game runs in it and also a bit about the graphics and how it compares to PC and console, and that's about it. I don't know who put this drink here. It's a bit tangy. We must not forget, people, that Hitman Absolution is an old game now, released back in 2012 for PS3, Xbox 360 and PC. Here it is, up and running on my PS3, running at 720p and 30 FPS. I have captured the performance here with the application TR Drop. Some textures, especially foliage, look a bit soft because of the anti-aliasing solution, but honestly, it still looks great for the PS3 hardware limitations. I think this scene in Chinese New Year pulling off 30 FPS is actually pretty impressive. It also came to macOS in 2014 by Feral Interactive, obviously. The macOS version was 32-bit and was discontinued in 2019 following Apple's transition to 64-bit. Hopefully Feral can bring it back to Mac in the future as a 64-bit app. It's worth giving that context, as it's one of the big reasons why this game excels on mobile. It's not really a demanding game anymore. Hence why the game is playable on an iPhone XR, which is 7 years old at this point. Feral told me the main visual improvements to the mobile port are focused on the UX elements, while the core visuals remain very similar to the 2019 HD edition released on PC and console. To be honest, the HD edition, or PC version, didn't really improve that much over the original release, like here on PS3. The main improvements are obviously higher resolution support. That being said, the game has aged pretty well thanks to its detailed environments, impressive lighting, and cinematic presentation. The character animations, cutscene direction, and overall atmosphere still hold up today. On mobile, the game uses a custom bilinear upscaling solution instead of something like Metal FX or AMD's contrast adaptive sharpening, which Feral have used in Alien Isolation and Grid Legends on mobile. For anti-aliasing, Feral opted for an FXAA algorithm. They explained that while MSAA can offer slightly sharper results, its heavy performance cost meant that using FXAA allowed them to keep other graphic settings turned up higher overall, which gives a better visual balance on mobile. All devices, even down to the iPhone XR, use an isotropic texture filtering, which helps textures retain more detail at oblique viewing details. Feral told me they don't use SSAO on mobile devices as they found it was not compatible with some of the mobile-specific performance optimizations. They went on to say, given the choice, getting the additional performance and offering a smoother experience while being able to raise the other graphic settings was worth the trade-off. The game also features dynamic resolution scaling, which automatically lowers the internal resolution during demanding moments to keep the frame rate stable. A key improvement in Feral's port with Hitman Absolution is its shader pre-warming, which reduces gameplay stutter. When you first install the game, the setup process also includes a shader compilation in the background. You won't actually see this happening unless you enable the Metal Performance HUD like I have done here, and it shows all of the compiled shaders. On my iPhone 17 Pro, it compiled over 5,000 shaders, and it was the same on my M4 iPad Pro. This is a really effective approach, as we have seen with their other game, Grid Legends, and it's something that many other developers skip, opting instead to compile shaders during gameplay, which often leads to noticeable stutter and frame rate drops. HITMAN Absolution on iPhone and iPad includes the usual range of graphical options we've seen in other Feral ports, but this time there are some extra advanced settings to play with. You can choose from 3 optimization presets: graphics, which prioritizes visual fidelity; performance, which lowers some settings to boost frame rate; and battery saver, which drops visuals further to extend battery life. Interestingly, performance mode isn't available on every device. Lower end models don't get it because they can't maintain a stable 60 FPS, while the most powerful devices don't really need it, since graphics mode already runs the game at 60 FPS. Battery saver, though, is available on all devices. There's also a performance benchmark. It shows your minimum, maximum, and average FPS at your current settings. As far as I know, this might be one of the first mobile games to include a full benchmark mode. It's awesome. I do hope that Feral add your graphics settings to the results screen in the future. That would make it easier to share and compare with others, especially since there's already a share button. It would also be great if the benchmark displayed the FPS live during the test, so you can see how it performs in real time. Here, I'm obviously using the Metal Performance HUD to show live performance data during the benchmark, which is really helpful. Finally, you can enable advanced graphics, which is basically just a frame rate limiter. You can choose between 60, 40, 30 FPS or device default, which caps the frame rate at your display's refresh rate. So if you've got a 120Hz iPhone or iPad, you can get up to 120 FPS gameplay. One thing to note, 40 FPS only works on 120Hz displays. On 60Hz screens, choosing 40 FPS will actually cap the game at 30 instead. Feral told me this is because 60Hz displays don't support a 40Hz mode. Maybe 40 FPS on a 60Hz screen wouldn't look as smooth compared to running on a 120Hz display too. Overall, it's awesome to see how much control Feral gives players over performance and visuals with this port, especially compared to earlier titles like Alien Isolation, Grid Legends, or XCOM 2. Many of you have said you wished their games had adjustable FPS option, and now that it's possible here, it would be great to see if Feral could bring a similar feature to their other games too. Now let's go over the performance of the game across multiple iPhone and iPads. Here's my iPhone 17 Pro Max. Like many of my recent devices, it's completely overkill for HITMAN Absolution. The game always targets a resolution of 1799 by 828 and uses dynamic resolution scaling. Running the game at graphics preset with all post-processing effects enabled, it easily maintains a stable 60 FPS throughout gameplay, with a consistent 16 milliseconds frame interval, and GPU frame time is always under 16 ms too. The phone does heat up quite fast though, reaching a thermal state of serious Seeing that label might sound a little alarming, but it's really not. It's perfectly normal for a phone to get hot during gaming, even with the vapor chamber here. Even when hot, the A17 Pro chip doesn't seem to struggle, and there are no frame rate drops at all for the 60 FPS target. I think that's a great result. Here's the benchmark after 30 minutes or so of gameplay. You'll see a few small dips, but that's nothing major. The benchmark reports an average frame rate of 58 FPS. Now, this phone obviously has a 120Hz display. So, how does it perform when targeting 120 FPS? The short answer is that it can't really hold it. The first time I ran the benchmark, it showed an average FPS of around 80 at graphics preset, which is fairly decent. But after 30 minutes of gameplay, the same benchmark will average closer to 60 FPS. Less intensive indoor scenes can hit around 100 FPS, but once you're outside with lots of NPCs, the performance drops quickly. Switching to Energy Saver preset with all post-processing effects disabled helps a bit. The average FPS in the benchmark mode only jumps up to about 89 FPS, which isn't really that much more than what I was running at graphics mode. That's a little bit smoother, but it's still nowhere near a consistent 120 FPS. We need the game to be consistently hitting under 8 ms for the GPU frame time to be hitting 120 FPS, and the phone simply does not hit that consistently. Realistically, 120 FPS is a very ambitious target for a phone, even for an older AAA game like this one. The performance at 60 FPS is completely perfect, and honestly, that's where Hitman feels the best to play on recent iPhones. And the game looks gorgeous. I don't think this game benefits from a super high frame rate. Moving on, we have my iPad Pro 11-inch models, one with the M1 and one with the M4 chip. Each have 16 gig of RAM. The resolution is practically identical on both at around 1260p. Dynamic resolution scaling is active as well, which subtly adjusts the internal resolution when needed to maintain smooth frame rates. Across both iPads, playing at 60 FPS is ideal. It's quite impressive that I couldn't get either device to hit a serious thermal state or even fair thermal state. Both stayed at nominal during my 30 minutes of gameplay tests at graphics preset. Not bad. The benchmark mode shows a 60 FPS too, or pretty much. Of course, longer play sessions will naturally raise the temperature, but these results are still very promising. What's even more impressive is how the M1 model handles demanding scenes filled with NPCs, like the train station and Chinatown Square missions, without major drops or stuttering. Now, what about 120 FPS gameplay on these iPad Pros? The benchmark mode initially shows great numbers, but it can be misleading to use this as concrete results because, as we all know, mobile devices get hot. Once you start extended play, the tablets quickly throttle and frame rate drops begin to dip. Both devices reach a serious thermal state very quickly. As I said earlier, the GPU frame time needs to be below 8 ms consistently in order for the game to hold 120 FPS. And while the M4 iPad Pro hits that target more often than M1, both still struggle in heavier scenes. Even at battery saver preset with all advanced post-processing effects turned off, a completely stable 120 FPS isn't achievable. Look, I'll be honest, some people might actually enjoy playing the game this way, but for me, I just find it a little bit jarring where the game is consistently jumping between 120, 100, and then 80. If you aim for 60 FPS on these iPad Pros, the game runs very well, and both of these devices don't get hot. And I strongly recommend playing the game like this. Anyway, what this proves is that every M series iPad can run this game perfectly well if you aim for 60 FPS. Yeah, the game looks great, it has strong visuals and minimal heat buildup and just good performance. I wanted to take a look at a modern but weaker Apple device, which is the iPad mini with the A17 Pro chip. The game runs at a resolution of 1729 by 1136 with DRS. Like my M series iPads, this device doesn't get hot at all. It consistently reports a thermal state of nominal, which is impressive considering the A17 Pro here uses the lower 5-core GPU variant over the iPhone 17 Pro. By default, the game runs at 30 FPS on the graphics preset, though you can manually switch it to 60 FPS in the settings, which I strongly recommend. Running the benchmark mode at the graphics preset with all other advanced effects enabled, I found the game is pulling off 60 more consistently than the benchmark is showing. This is after 30 minutes of gameplay as well. I found only one scene that actually struggles to hold 60, which I'll show you shortly, but overall, the game can actually play at 60 here perfectly fine. There are a few minor frame pacing issues, though they're barely noticeable without the HUD enabled. You're not going to notice them. This is really good for a compact device and Apple's more modern budget iPad. Being able to play this game at a, for the most part, consistent 60 FPS is really good. I really need to show this iPad mini more because it's very capable for gaming. It's very underrated too. And I just really like that it's able to pull off a consistent 60 FPS for the most part in HITMAN Absolution. The only significant drop that I encountered was during the Black Water Park mission inside the building, and this is likely caused by the complex reflections on the floor. Enabling performance mode fixes this completely, but it does reduce reflection quality. So this probably explains why Feral have capped the graphics preset at 60 by default, because in some scenes you might get it a little bit below 60. And on the other hand, performance mode runs the game at 60 FPS by default. All right, now we're talking. The iPhone 12 Pro. It's hard to believe this device is, 5 years old now? It features the A14 Bionic chip and 6 gig of RAM. On this phone, the game runs at 1791 by 828 with DRS. So, can this device actually pull off 60 FPS? Not quite, but in many scenes it can. In fact, in quite a lot of scenes it can, which is actually really impressive for something that is quite old. Running the benchmark at battery saver preset initially reports an average FPS of 59. But that figure is a little misleading. Within just 3 minutes, yes, 3 minutes, the phone reaches a thermal state of Sirius, and this makes it really hard for the phone to maintain high frame rates. The age of the chip certainly plays a role too, but it is still impressive how capable this phone is in 2025. Even when running hot, the phone manages to hit 60 FPS in plenty of scenes. Achieving this target in crowded areas like Chinatown Square is particularly impressive, considering the heavy number of NPCs. In sequences with fire, explosions, or complex lighting, GPU frame times still often stay below 16 ms. Where the A14 starts to struggle is in large, open environments with dense crowds. Still, for an A14 chip with 6 gig of RAM, I'm really, really impressed. I'm impressed both by the phone and by what Feral have done. The game defaults to 30 FPS when using the graphics preset, and for me, that feels like a sensible choice here by Feral. At this setting, the phone never overheats and remains comfortably at a nominal thermal state. 30 FPS is perfectly fine for this type of gameplay experience. It's the same target used on PS3 and Xbox 360, and I imagine many players familiar with those versions will find it more than acceptable here too. And again, the game just is perfectly playable at lower frame rates. Alrighty, so our last device to look at is the iPhone XR, powered by the A12 chip. This phone doesn't support iOS 26, so I have to use the older version of the Metal Performance HUD to gather results. Even so, this test shows why developers should follow Feral's approach to mobile ports. Older AAA games can still run remarkably well on aging hardware. The iPhone XR released in 2018, 7 years ago, yet it remains surprisingly capable for gaming. If you think about it, in many ways, this phone is more powerful than the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, and I believe it runs HITMAN Absolution at comparable or even slightly higher settings. The PS3 version rendered at native 720p, while the iPhone XR runs at a slightly higher resolution of 828p, although with DRS helping to maintain stability. Naturally, this device can't sustain 60 FPS. The initial benchmark shows an average FPS of 51, which is really cool. But after 30 minutes of gameplay, that drops down to around 32 FPS. That said, in less demanding indoor areas, the game can hit a locked 60 FPS, which is genuinely impressive for hardware this old. 60 FPS. 60 on A12. Anyway, I wouldn't recommend playing the game this way though. This is playing at battery saver preset and with all advanced settings off, and DRS is being used very heavily in the background, making the phone go to incredibly low resolutions. It looks much better, and the experience is much more consistent at graphics preset, where it maintains a solid 30 FPS. DRS doesn't need to drop as low since we are targeting a much lower frame rate, and performance feels very similar to the original console versions. It's pretty cool, I know I'm saying it again, but it's cool from my perspective to see this phone still managing gaming relatively well in 2025, even if it's for older AAA releases. Alright, so that was HITMAN Absolution on iPhone and iPad. I had a really fun time making this video, and I want to say a big thank you to Feral Interactive for giving me early access to this game. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And I also want to say thank you so much to Feral for answering so many of my questions about this port. It has taught me so much about iOS game development. Feral Interactive, they just know what they're doing. They continue to bring out quality ports, and they know how to optimize them for mobile-specific hardware. And I really hope that more developers follow their game development structure on mobile. Have a good one, guys.
Sean,
It was a joke. Stuart, it was a joke. I'm sorry, okay?
It's that it was killing me.
I'm sorry, Stuart. I'm sorry. It was just a joke. I promise.
What
It was
was
just
that?
to make people laugh.
What did he
It
make
was
me
a
drink?
one-time thing. I didn't mean to do it, okay?
You know, sometimes you just take it a little bit too far. A little bit too far, just a little bit. This time it was too far.
Just, okay? Listen to me, please.
I'm in a lot of pain.